Ta-Wu Park wiped sweat from his forehead as the Arizona sun blazed overhead. He closed the hood of an old pickup truck, satisfied with his work. His small garage stood alone on the desert outskirts of Phoenix, surrounded by cacti and dust. At 34, Ta-Wu had strong hands and knowing eyes that could diagnose any engine problem. Another job done, he muttered to himself, putting away his tools. The clock showed 8:30 p.m. Time to go home. Just as he reached for the light switch, the night sky exploded with brightness. A flash of blue-white light turned darkness to day for 3 seconds. Then came the sound, a boom that shook the building and rattled tools on the wall. Ta-Wu rushed outside. A streak of fire cut across the sky, ending behind the low hills about half a mile from his shop. Meteor, he wondered aloud, but something felt different. The light had been too steady, the path too controlled. He grabbed his heavy flashlight and first aid kit from the truck. Whatever had crashed, someone might need help. The desert night wrapped around him as he walked away from his shop. His flashlight beam bounced across the scrubland. The air smelled strange, like metal and something sweet he couldn't name. He followed a trail of disturbed earth and small smoking pieces of debris. Some bits glowed with a soft blue light that didn't fade. Ta-Wu picked one up. It felt warm and vibrated gently against his palm. "Definitely not a meteor," he said, dropping the piece and moving faster. Over the next ridge, Ta-Wu stopped in his tracks. There in a shallow impact crater sat what could only be a spacecraft. About the size of a small bus, it had no sharp edges, just flowing curves of silver-blue metal. No visible windows, just seamless metal that seemed to drink in his flashlight beam and send it back change. One section of the ship showed damage. A dark gash ran along the bottom, and fluid leaked from it, glowing the same blue as the debris he'd found. "Hello," Ta-Wu called, approaching slowly. "Anyone hurt in there?" A seam appeared in the side of the craft, then widened into a doorway. Light spilled out, and 3 figures stood silhouetted in the opening. They stepped forward into the moonlight, and Ta-Wu's breath caught. They were shaped like women, but clearly not human. Their skin had a pale blue tint that seemed to glow from within. Their eyes were larger than human eyes, with pupils that reflected light like a cat's. They had hair, but it moved strangely, as if alive or floating in water. Their clothes looked like one-piece suits made of something between cloth and metal, with symbols over the left chest that might be rank or names. The tallest one stepped forward. Her hair was silver white and pulled back tightly. She looked at Ta-Wu and spoke. The sounds were beautiful, like singing more than talking, but made no sense to him. She frowned and tried again, slower this time. Ta-Wu shook his head. "I don't understand," he said. Then he tapped his chest. "I'm Ta-Wu. I'm a mechanic." He mimed turning a wrench. "I fix things." The 3 visitors looked at each other. The tall one touched her own chest. "Jae-min," she said clearly. She gestured to her companions. One had darker blue skin and short black hair that curled around her face. "Had one," said Jae-min. The 3rd visitor had greenish-blue skin and hair in many tiny braids. "Some," said Jae-min. Jae-min then pointed to the damaged section of their ship and made a braking motion with her hands. She pointed to Ta-Wu, then to the ship, and raised her eyebrows. "Your ship is broken," said Ta-Wu, "and you want me to help fix it." Jae-min didn't understand his words, but seemed to get his meaning. She nodded and smiled. Her teeth were perfectly white, but slightly pointed. Ta-Wu approached the ship carefully. The damage looked bad, but fixable. Some kind of impact had torn through the outer hull. "I can try," he said, making thumbs up. "Let me get my tools." Jae-min spoke to her companions. Hadwan looked unhappy and gestured at Ta-Wu while speaking rapidly. Desam said something that sounded calming. Jae-min turned back to Ta-Wu and nodded firmly. "Yes," she said, the first Earth word she'd spoken. Yes, repeated Tawu, smiling. I'll be right back. As he jogged back to his shop, his mind raced. Aliens had crashed near his garage. Real aliens who needed his help. Of all the mechanics in all the world, they'd found him. He gathered his tools, his portable generator, and his welding gear. He loaded everything into his truck and drove carefully across the desert to the crash site. When he returned, Hawan was examining the damaged section with a device that projected 3D diagrams in the air. She looked up at Tawu's truck with surprise. Tawu set up his work lights. Under better lighting, he could see the ship was even more beautiful and strange. The metal didn't reflect light normally. It seemed to bend it, creating colors that shouldn't be there. Jaimin watched him closely as he examined the damage. Up close, he could see the hull was made of layers, like nothing on Earth. The outer layer had been pierced, and some kind of fluid system was leaking. I think I can patch this, he said, pointing to the tear. But I need to understand how it works first. Haewon stepped forward and projected her diagram again. She pointed to different parts and made slow explanations Tawu couldn't understand. But the diagram helped. He could see how the systems connected. This is like a cooling system, he said, pointing. And this is structure, and this is. He paused at glowing lines in the diagram. Power. Haewon nodded, seeming pleased he understood. Taewoo opened his toolbox and selected a wrench. Let's get started. As the desert night grew cold around them, Taewoo worked under the strange stars. 3 visitors from another world watched his hands bring their ship back to life, piece by piece. The sun rose over the desert, casting long shadows across the crashed ship. Taewoo had worked through the night, his hands dirty with strange blue fluid and earth oil. His eyes burned from lack of sleep, but excitement kept him alert. Coffee, he said to himself, pulling a thermos from his truck. He poured a cup and watched as Jaemin approached. She had been observing him all night, asking questions with gestures when words failed. Taewoo offered her the cup. Want to try? Jaemin sniffed the coffee carefully, then took a small sip. Her large eyes widened, and she made a face that needed no translation. Taewoo laughed as she handed the cup back quickly. Not for everyone, he said with a smile. Haewon emerged from the ship carrying a small silver device the size of a phone. She pressed it against her throat, spoke into it, then handed it to Taewoo and motioned for him to do the same. He held it against his neck. It felt warm and vibrated slightly. Hello, he said, feeling foolish. I'm trying to help fix your ship. Haewon took the device back, adjusted something, then returned it. When she spoke again, the device made sounds that almost resembled English. Thank you. Help appreciated. Ship damaged. Taewoo's eyes widened. Is this a translator? The device processed his words, and Haewon nodded. Yes. Learning your sounds will improve. Over the next hour, as the translator learned more English, communication became easier. Daesum explained they came from something called the Silver Harmony, which seemed to be many planets working together. Why did you crash? Taewoo asked. Jaemin answered this time. Meteor storm. Not on charts. Ship hit. Emergency landing. Where were you going? The 3 aliens exchanged looks. Observing, said Jaemin finally. Your world. From distance. Taewoo whistled. So I wasn't supposed to meet you at all. Correct, said Jaemin. But now, need help. Haewon led Taewoo to the ship's rear section. A panel had been removed, revealing what must be the engine. It looked both familiar and completely alien. There were tubes and connections like in a car engine, but they pulsed with blue light. Some components seemed to float without touching anything else. Our propulsion system damage, Haewon explained through the translator. Energy matrix destabilized. Cannot repair with our tools. Taewoo studied the engine carefully. Despite its strangeness, he recognized basic principles. Fluid moved through tubes to cool things down. Energy flowed through conduits. parts connected in logical sequences. I might be able to help, he said slowly, but I'll need to understand how this works first. HFY nodded and produced a device that projected glowing diagrams in the air. She pointed to different sections, explaining their functions. The translator struggled with technical terms, but Ta-Wu grasped the concepts. This is like a radiator, he said, pointing to one system. And this is like a fuel pump. Yes, said HFY, looking pleased. Similar function, different physics. They worked through the first day like this, with Ta-Wu learning the ship's systems. By nightfall, he had a basic understanding of what needed fixing, but the materials required didn't exist on Earth. These parts, he said, holding damaged components. I've never seen metal like this. Special alloy, explained HFY. Processes energy without melting. Ta-Wu thought for a moment. What temperature does it need to handle? When HFY told him, he whistled. That's hot. But I might have an idea. The second day, Ta-Wu drove into Phoenix and bought titanium rods used in specialized welding. He returned to find Daesam outside the ship, watching the desert sunrise with obvious wonder. Your world, she said when she saw him, has beautiful colors. Ta-Wu looked at the landscape with fresh eyes. The reds and golds of the morning desert did look magical. What's your world like? He asked. 3 moons, she said. Purple sky. Cities that float. The image made Ta-Wu pause. These beings came from a world he couldn't even imagine. Back at the ship, he and HFY began the real work. Ta-Wu machined the titanium into shapes that could replace the damaged components. It wouldn't last forever, but it might get them home. Your metal compound's too brittle for the energy converter, Ta-Wu explained after testing some options. But I think this titanium alloy might work as a temporary fix. HFY watched him work with obvious curiosity. She seemed surprised by his methods, which relied more on hands-on adjustment than precision instruments. You use feeling? She asked, watching him test a part by touch. Sometimes you just know when something fits right, he explained. By the 3rd day, they had replaced the most critical components. Jaemin often came to watch their progress, asking questions about Earth technology and explaining bits of their own culture. How did you learn to fix things? She asked Ta-Wu. My father was a mechanic, he answered, hands busy with a delicate connection. I watched him work since I was small. Then I studied in school, but mostly I learned by doing. No universal diagrams. Asked HFY, looking confused. Every engine is different, Ta-Wu said. You learn the principles, then adapt. Jaemin watched as Ta-Wu improvised a tool from a bent piece of metal to reach a difficult spot. Humans are resourceful, she commented. Our specialists require specific parts. You create new ways. That's what mechanics do, Ta-Wu smiled. We make do with what we have. Later, as the sun set on the 3rd day, Ta-Wu connected the last replacement part. The engine hummed to life, its blue glow stronger and steadier than before. HFY ran diagnostics on her devices and gave what appeared to be a smile of relief. Energy flow stabilized, 78% efficiency. Will that get you home? Ta-Wu asked. Jaemin nodded. Sufficient for return journey. Ta-Wu felt oddly disappointed. He had enjoyed working with these strange visitors, learning about their world and technology. Once they left, who would believe his story? We test full systems tomorrow, said Jaemin, noting his expression. Still need your help. Ta-Wu nodded, relieved for reasons he couldn't quite explain. As they closed the engine panel, Daesam brought out food from their ship, strange blue cubes that tasted like honey and salt. Under the stars, human and aliens shared a meal and stories, connected by a work that transcended their different worlds. Morning came with clear skies on the 4th day. The ship's repairs seemed complete. Ta-Wu arrived early, bringing donuts and coffee to share with his new friends. He found them running tests on the engine systems. Energy levels good, HFY reported. her blue face lit by the glow of floating screens. Should be ready for launch by sunset. Taigu felt a mix of pride and sadness. He was glad to help, but would miss these strange visitors when they left. "I brought breakfast," he said, opening the donut box. The aliens examined the colorful round treats with curiosity. Dasam was the first to try one, selecting a chocolate-glazed donut. Her large eyes grew even wider at the first bite. "Sweet," she exclaimed through the translator. "Very good." They sat in the shade of the ship, eating donuts and talking about the differences between their worlds. Jimin explained that their home planet had 3 moons and oceans that glowed at night. Taiwu told them about Earth's many cultures and landscapes. The peaceful morning didn't last. As Ha-1 ran a final system check, a sharp noise cut through the air. It started as a low hum, but quickly rose to a painful whine. The ship's hull began to pulse with uneven blue light. Alarms sounded inside the ship. Daesam dropped her donut and ran to the control panel. "Something's wrong," she called, her voice losing its usual calm. "Power readings are spiking." Tawu and the others rushed inside. The ship's interior was flashing with red warning lights. Displays showed rapidly changing numbers and symbols. "Containment failing," Daesam shouted over the noise. "We have minutes before catastrophic failure." Ha-1's fingers flew over the controls. "Automatic systems not responding. Cannot initiate emergency shutdown." Jimin turned to Tawu, her face grave. "If containment fails, energy release will destroy everything within 1 mile." Tawu's heart raced. His shop, the nearby farms, and all of them would be vaporized. He forced himself to think clearly, remembering what he'd learned about the ship's systems. "The coolant system is overheating," he said, studying the displays. "Is there a manual override?" Jimin nodded. "Yes, but requires access to core chamber. Radiation levels too high for safety." Taiwu looked at the ship schematic on the screen. He spotted a narrow tunnel leading to the core. "What about that maintenance conduit? I'm smaller than you 3. I could reach the manual controls." Ha-1 shook her head firmly. "Too dangerous. Heat will damage your cells." "We don't have a choice," Tawu said. The whine from the core was getting louder, and the ship vibrated beneath their feet. "Show me what to do." Jamin hesitated, then nodded. She quickly explained the override sequence, while Ha-1 gathered protective gear. "This will help some," Ha-1 said, handing him a thin silver blanket. "But not enough." Taigu grabbed his welding gloves from his toolbox and soaked a cloth in water to cover his face. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. The maintenance tunnel was barely wide enough for his shoulders. He crawled forward on his elbows, pushing the translator device ahead of him. The heat increased with every foot, like crawling into an oven. "Turn left at junction." Ha-1's voice came through the translator. "Panel will be on right wall." Sweat poured down Tawu's face, soaking through his clothes. The air burned his lungs. When he reached the junction, the metal was hot enough that his gloves began to smoke. The override panel looked like the one Ha-1 had shown him, but the symbol swam before his eyes. The heat was making it hard to think. "I'm at the panel," he managed to say. "Remove red safety cover," came the instruction. "Turn 3 dials counterclockwise. Then press sequence. Top, bottom, middle." His gloves were falling apart from the heat. Taiwu pulled the silver blanket around his hands and worked quickly. The metal dials burned his fingers through the protection, but he kept turning them. When he pressed the final button, nothing happened for a moment. Then he heard a new sound, a deeper hum that gradually replaced the high-pitched whine. "Coolant flowing to new circuits," Ha-1 reported through the translator. "Temperature dropping." Taiwu started backing out of the tunnel, but his vision blurred. The heat and radiation were taking their toll. He felt dizzy, and his muscles wouldn't respond properly. "Can't move," he gasped into the translator. "Keep coming," Ji-Min's voice urged. "We'll help when you're close enough." He dragged himself backward, inch by painful inch. Just when he thought he couldn't go any further, blue hands reached in and grabbed his shoulders, pulling him the rest of the way out. Taiwu collapsed on the floor of the ship. His skin was red and blistered in places. Desom pressed a cool device against his forehead that immediately reduced the pain. Radiation exposure moderate, she reported. Treatable. Jae-min knelt beside him, applying a gel to his burned hands. The danger is past. You saved all of us. As his strength returned, Taiwu sat up. The ship was quiet now, all systems showing normal on the displays. What happened? He asked. New parts caused energy imbalance, Ha-1 explained. Not your fault. Should have predicted. Your solution was clever, Jae-min added. Bypassing main coolant system. Our engineers would have tried to fix original circuit. Taiwu shrugged. Sometimes you need to try a different approach. Daesom handed him a cup of water. You risk your life, she said softly. For strangers not of your world. Anyone would have done the same, Taiwu said. No, Daesom shook her head firmly. Many would not. We have visited 17 worlds. This quality is rare. Jae-min helped Taiwu to his feet. His burns were already healing under the alien gel. Most species, Jae-min said thoughtfully, when meeting others, think first of advantage or threat. You thought only of helping, even at great risk. Taiwu felt uncomfortable with their praise. I just did what needed doing. As the day turned to evening, Taiwu sat outside the ship with his new friends. The stars began to appear, and he wondered which one was their home. Our world needs to meet yours, Jae-min said suddenly. There is much we could learn from each other. Taiwu looked at her with surprise. I thought you were just observing us from a distance. Plans change, said Jae-min with what might have been a smile. Sometimes a crisis reveals important truths. With the power core stabilized, the aliens decided to stay longer to make sure all systems were fully repaired. These extra days turned into a week. Taiwu closed his shop, telling customers he had a family emergency. In a way, that wasn't a lie. These strange visitors had become something like family to him. One evening, as they sat around a small fire outside the ship, Jae-min explained more about why they had come to Earth. We have watched your planet for 50 years, she said. The translator had improved greatly, and now caught most of her words correctly. At first, just with distant sensors, then small probes. This mission was to gather final data. Data for what? Asked Taiwu, roasting a marshmallow on a stick. He had brought supplies for s'mores, which the aliens found fascinating. To decide if humans are ready, said Jae-min. Ready for what? Contact. Joining other worlds. Taiwu nearly dropped his marshmallow. You mean there's a whole community of aliens out there? Ha-1 nodded. Many species, many planets, working together. But not all agree humans should join, added Daesom. Some fear your warlike nature. Jae-min pointed to the night sky. Dark orbit ships attacked us near your moon. They believe young species should develop alone. Taiwu looked up at the stars with new eyes. The universe suddenly seemed both larger and smaller than before. What happens now? He asked. We report what we learned, said Jae-min, including our time with you. The next day, Taiwu brought his old guitar to the ship. Jae-min had asked about human music, so he played some simple songs. The aliens listened with intense interest, especially to the way minor chords created feelings of sadness. Our music uses mathematics, explained Ha-1. Patterns that please the mind. Your music speaks to something else. Emotions, said Taiwu. Sometimes the best songs make you feel things you can't put into words. Jae-min tried to play the guitar, her long blue fingers struggling with the chords. When she finally managed a simple tune, her face lit up with joy that needed no translation. Daesom was more interested in Earth's natural features. She showed Taiwu 3D images of her home world, a planet with 3 small moons and vast oceans that glowed with bioluminescence at night. "Your oceans are dark," she said, "but full of life. And your weather, so violent and beautiful. You should see a hurricane from space," Ta Wu said. "We have," Disom replied. "Magnificent power. We watched one called Katrina." The thought that these beings had seen Earth's disasters from above was strange to Ta Wu. Hai-Wan spent hours asking about human technology. She was particularly interested in how quickly Earth had advanced. "Your species moved from combustion engines to primitive space travel in just over a century," she noted, studying pictures of old Model T cars and the International Space Station on Ta Wu's phone. "Most species take 3 times as long." "We're in a hurry, I guess," said Ta Wu with a smile. "No, something different," said Hai-Wan. "You try many paths at once. Some fail, some succeed. Other species follow one path carefully." In exchange, Hai-Wan showed Ta Wu images of their technology. He saw cities that floated in the clouds, ships that traveled between stars, and energy sources that pulled power from empty space itself. "This is why some fear humans," she explained. "You advance quickly. Some worry what happens when you have such power." At mealtimes, they shared food from both worlds. The aliens could eat most Earth foods, though they found meat strange and preferred fruits and vegetables. Their own food came in the form of colored cubes and liquids that tasted better than they looked. Tai Wu taught them card games, which Disom always won. She taught him a game using small glowing stones that changed color based on the player's thoughts. Tai Wu was terrible at it. One night, Jimin showed Ta Wu images of her home world. Unlike the others, she came from a planet with rings of ice that reflected rainbow light across the surface. Cities that were built within giant crystal structures that channeled this light for power. "We have gardens that float on air currents," she said, showing him flowers that looked like living jewels. "They migrate with the seasons, following optimal conditions." "It's beautiful," said Ta Wu. "I can't imagine growing up in a place like that." "Yet you can imagine it exists," said Jimin. "That is a human strength." On the final day of repairs, as Ha-Wan ran tests on the ship's systems, Jimin took Ta Wu for a walk away from the others. "Our council has been debating whether humans are ready for official contact," she explained. "There are concerns about your wars, your environmental damage." Ta Wu looked back at Earth's horizon. From here, he could see smoke from factories in the distance. "We have our problems," he admitted, "but we're trying to be better." Jae-min studied his face carefully. "I have seen this in you. One individual who shows compassion, ingenuity, and courage. Perhaps there are many like you." "There are," Ta Wu assured her. "Many better than me." They stood in silence, watching the sunset paint the desert in gold and red. Finally, Jae-min spoke again. "Tomorrow, we must leave. But I have a question for you." "What's that?" asked Ta Wu. "If you could speak for humanity to the stars, what would you say?" Ta Wu thought for a long moment before answering. "I'd say we're still young, and we make mistakes. But we dream of better things. We look up at the stars and wonder what's out there. And most of us, deep down, hope we're not alone." Jae-min nodded slowly. A good answer. As they walked back to the ship, Ta Wu realized he might be the first human to have this conversation with someone from another world. It felt like both a huge responsibility and a simple, honest talk between friends. The day of departure came with a clear desert sky. Ta Wu arrived at the ship early, his truck loaded with supplies for their journey. He had bought them snacks for the trip: fruits, water, and chocolate, which had become Daesum's favorite Earth food. The ship looked different now. The damage was repaired, the hull polished to a mirror shine. It hummed with power, ready to return to the stars. Ha-Wan was running final checks on the engine. "All systems good," she reported. "Better than when we arrived, thanks to your improvements." Ta Wu felt proud of that. Some of his solutions had been simple but effective. The coolant bypass he designed after the crisis had actually improved efficiency by 8%. "Just doing my job," he said, but he couldn't hide his smile. Dusum emerged from the ship carrying a small bag. "Gifts from Earth," she explained, showing him the collection of simple things she had gathered: rocks, feathers, a cactus flower preserved in clear resin. "The Council will find these fascinating," she said, "especially the music files you shared." Tai Wu had loaded some songs onto a device they gave him, everything from classical to rock to folk music from around the world. He hoped whoever heard them would understand something about human emotions. Jimin was the last to appear. She wore a formal-looking uniform now, with silver symbols across the chest that probably indicated her rank. "We must return to our fleet," she announced. "Our absence has been noted." Tai Wu nodded, feeling a strange emptiness in his chest. "I'll miss our talks. Safe travels." He had prepared himself for goodbye. These beings had jobs to do, reports to file. Their time with him had been an accident, a detour. Now life would return to normal, fixing cars, watching baseball games, living in a world that didn't know what was out there among the stars. But Jimin wasn't saying goodbye. She exchanged glances with Ha-won and Do-sam, then turned back to Ta-Wu with a solemn expression. "Ta-Wu Park of Earth, we offer you a choice." From a pocket in her uniform, she pulled out a small metallic disc about the size of a coin. It shimmered with colors that shifted as it moved. "This contains coordinates and communication protocols. In 1 Earth year, our council will send an official delegation to your planet's leaders. This will be humanity's introduction to the galactic community." Ta-Wu stared at the disc. His hands trembled slightly as he tried to understand what she was saying. "First contact. Because of me." Ha-won stepped forward. "Your assistance proved what some of us have long argued, that humans are ready to join us among the stars. The Dark Orbit faction believes humans are dangerous," added Do-sam. "But you showed the opposite. You risked yourself to help strangers. You found solutions our own engineers missed." "This is big," Ta-Wu said, struggling to find words. "Shouldn't this be given to a government? Scientists, someone important." "There is more," Do-sam continued. "We request you serve as liaison between our peoples. Your understanding of both human and silver harmony technology would be invaluable." "Me? But I'm just a mechanic," Ta-Wu protested. He looked down at his oil-stained hands. "I fix cars and trucks. I don't know anything about diplomacy or alien relations." "Sometimes," Jae-min said with a smile, "the most qualified person is not the one with titles, but the one who acts when action is needed." She placed the disc in his palm. It felt warm, almost alive. "What do I do with this?" he asked. "Keep it safe," said Jimin. "When the time comes, it will activate. It will guide our ships to a safe meeting place. And until then, live your life. But perhaps prepare your people in small ways. Help them look up at the stars with hope instead of fear." Ta-Wu thought about his small repair shop on the edge of the desert, his quiet life, his morning coffee and evening beers. Then he thought about the worlds they had described: rainbow rings of ice, oceans that glowed at night, gardens that floated on air currents. He thought about Earth's problems: pollution, conflict, poverty, and the technologies that might help solve them. "I accept," he said finally, "on behalf of all humans who look up at the stars and wonder." Jae-min surprised him then by stepping forward and embracing him in the human manner, her arms wrapping around his shoulders. Her skin felt cool against his, but the gesture was warm. "Prepare your world, Ta-Wu Park. In 1 year, everything changes." The 3 aliens boarded their ship. The door sealed silently behind them. Ta-Wu backed away, the disc clutched tightly in his hand. The ship rose without sound, hovering for a moment above the desert floor. Lights flickered along its hull, pulsing in what seemed like a final farewell. Then it shot upward, leaving only a faint blue trail that quickly faded against the morning sky. Ta-Wu stood alone, watching until there was nothing left to see. The desert was quiet again, as if nothing extraordinary had happened there. He opened his palm and looked at the disk. In the sunlight, it showed complex patterns that shifted and changed as he turned it, proof that it hadn't been a dream. In his pocket, his phone rang. The garage, a customer wondering when he would reopen. "Tomorrow," Ta Wu said. "I had a family matter to take care of." He drove back to his shop, the disk safely tucked in his pocket. As he passed through town, he saw people going about their day, shopping, working, living their lives. None of them knew what was coming. None of them understood that the universe had just gotten much bigger. For now, he would go back to fixing engines. But he would also watch the stars every night, waiting for his friends to return. And he would think about what to say when they asked him to introduce humanity to the galaxy. It was a lot of responsibility for a mechanic from Arizona. But then, sometimes the most qualified person isn't the one with titles, but the one who happens to be in the right place at the right time, ready to help when help is needed. The end.